let the woman go. You are under arrest.
You better back up, pal!
There's something truly unique about 80s cinematography, detail, and aesthetic that enchants me, but I can't put my finger on. It could be the signature neon Hotline Miami aesthetic with elaborate style, iconic vehicles, memorable movies, comic books, video games, and TV shows, all of which have some trademark part of the decade branded into them. Trademarks which have become so timeless that online niches still flaunt and encourage them as to work towards normalizing them again. But there's one precise genre of art from the 80s that never fails to elude me. Never ceasing to entrench its foundations in works from its conception to the early 20th century, captivating audiences worldwide, venerated by casual consumers and critics everywhere, always stunning those lucky enough to witness its astounding impact on an audience, executing its own self-expression like no other, and vigorously continuing to revolutionize and amaze, 80s adult video was the magnum opus, better than anything ever created. In addition to really nefarious content, 80s horror acted as a badge of merit for filmmakers creating during that time. Coming out of the more psychological and exploitative decade that was the 70s, 80s horror popularized the slasher genre, sending its craze and style into high gear. Creatively assembling aesthetics and styles from the 80s horror of the same decade, namely the slasher type, rendered remarkable pieces of art that couldn't be paralleled by any piece of media lacking in them. In the delicate art of recreating products from such a time period, nobody can rival the independent game developer Puppet Combo in quality, experience, passion, and authenticity. They do a fantastic job in seamlessly fusing signature elements from late 20th century technology and PlayStation 1 style graphics, with the bonus of Silent Hill style gameplay recurring in some of their games. All this with the foundation of their games being slasher-type survival horror games makes every one of their experiences unique and remarkable pieces of terror that will surely shake any veteran gamer with copious amounts of time and experience on their hands. They nail the player's immersion of the game by presenting them with both blatantly obvious and more subtle attempts at instilling the player with a sense of fear mixed with existential dread, hopelessness, and paranoia all throughout the game. The aforementioned graphics and 80s aesthetics Puppet Combo harmoniously implement into their games work to plant the unique taste in horror the decade had into the player with their trademark, albeit puzzling, sound effects, the grid patterns that come on their cover art, their movie poster style cover art in and of itself, the VHS overlays, classic style of graphics, and non-21st century style environment the players are put in, just to name a few. Their music adds a whole other dimension of not just sound, but atmosphere and aesthetic to their games. The opening themes are just a piece of the mosaic that is Puppet Combo's soundtracks, be it whatever this is from Power Drill Massacre, the Super 80s title screen sounds from Babysitter Bloodbath, the immensely energizing theme from Night Ripper, or whatever this is from Feed Me Billy. Such awe-inspiring soundtracks are made by immensely talented artists, such as Nick Bassett and Protector 101, just to name a couple. Puppet Combo would fatally be lacking in the quality and sheer horror that their games can give to a player if they weren't integrated with such talent and musical insight. These elements and more lay the foundation for the quality and horror-filled experiences that is the gameplay. I've always been in love with the survival horror genre for as long as I can remember, with 2012 being the year I was exposed to some of the earliest in the genre. I've always wondered why there's such a scarcity of this type of video game, and why so many massive game development studios don't invest into it, besides for a few notable exceptions, leading mostly indie developers to make games of that nature, and it's still rare that one of them catches the mainstream's attention. I think Puppet Combo fills that sort of personal void for me because they consistently produce excellent survival horror games that put the player on edge, shake them to the core, and scare more shit out of them than an emptied colostomy bag. I can honestly say without exaggeration or deception that Puppet Combo's work is the scariest group of games I've ever, and possibly will ever, play. Nothing can come close to the thrill of finessing a deranged weapon-wielding maniac with an instrument straight out of a tool shed. It most definitely can give you one of the most generous adrenaline and or dopamine rushes, indulging in being right on the fine line between death and glory. But this rambling of loosely connected sentences giving a brief overview of everything doesn't even scratch the surface of Puppet Combo's mastery of horror. Puppet Combo first started when a game known as Halloween 3D began development in 2000. Pieces of the game were uploaded to a now defunct website, but the game halted development due to issues with the Halloween franchise, and in and of itself, resulting in the game eventually becoming the Babysitter Bloodbath trilogy. According to the Puppet Combo wiki, Puppet Combo, originally Pig Farmer Games, and real name Benedetto Ben Cucuzza, is a one-man game developer that specializes in a specific genre, mixing PS1 and PS2 survival horror games like Silent Hill and Resident Evil, with low-budget 70s slasher films like Halloween and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Starting in 2017, Puppet Combo began a Patreon and started making exclusive games on an almost monthly basis for it. In 2019, Puppet Combo started publishing games by other developers on his Patreon. In June 2020, Puppet Combo started a horror publishing label, Torture Star, and started promoting and publishing games from other small indie game developers. Throughout their existence, Puppet Combo has had a myriad of games either cease development or have their development status not known entirely, such as Texas Butcher, Blood Maniac, Sanitarium Massacre, Burnt Alive, Pitchfork Massacre, and A Monster with Eyes of Ice, just to name a few. Nonetheless, it's wonderful that Puppet Combo produces these games at the rate they do, since I highly doubt it would be the easiest thing to make quality horror games at a rapid rate on such a consistent basis, and I'm personally glad that this is all happening due to a small developer. I'm still hoping that Puppet Combo continues to improve in the quality of their games while keeping and at the same time developing the 80s aesthetic of their insanely scary games. Insanely scary games made up of core components that are essential to a player's experience interacting with them. As stated, the 80s VHS aesthetic to Puppet Combo's games are crucial to a player's experience and immersion into the game. Puppet Combo gives an 80s B-grade slasher movie feel to PS1 and PS2 style games from the late 90s and early 2000s in an effort to immerse the player in the experience and to let them know that this is a slasher-style survival horror game. This is often done before the actual game even starts, giving the player cover and concept art that looks like it could be straight out of your local Blockbuster store. Once it boots up, it often gives players selection menus with the same fonts and VHS-style overlays. Fonts and VHS-style overlays, which are a huge part of Puppet Combo's aesthetic when it comes to their horror games. In some cases, Puppet Combo has other visual options, such as a 16mm overlay, which is a fuzzy, more sepia-looking overlay, giving the experience a more 70s vibe, a 1995 overlay, more Super Nintendo feel, and a 1999 overlay for a Sega Dreamcast or N64 feel, which is the kind of graphics, environments, and player model styles Puppet Combo usually works with. They sometimes give the player the option of turning off or on a CRT monitor, graphics option, which makes it look like a CRT monitor, which for those of you who don't know, are more responsive and have less motion blur than a lot of today's monitors, giving the player an insanely retro vibe. Any different one of these personal choices can give the player an immensely different experience, since aesthetic choices truly do go a long way to immerse the player in the style, aesthetic, and game by explicitly implying that what they're playing is indeed a horror game and will scare them. Since the 80s was a decade that ushered in the slasher genre and popularized it, that was the perfect group of trademarks to use in a horror experience like this. Anybody that enjoyed these kinds of aesthetics would be glad they decided to have these options in the game, because there needed to be some sort of bridge between PS1 survival style horror games and the slasher genre. In addition to the graphics and styles, the gore, blood, props, and serial killer's paradise environments only go to deepen the player into the depravity of these deranged lunatics in their world. But it isn't a puppet combo game without another crucial part of terrifying a player. As mentioned, the opening themes are just a piece of the mosaic that is Puppet Combo soundtracks. Such awe-inspiring soundtracks are made by immensely talented artists such as Nick Bassett and Projector 101, just to name a couple. And these adrenaline-excreting, albeit subtly dreadful, themes always sound like they're straight out of a horror movie. In addition to the soundtracks, the sound design of the games is another dimension of creative insight that stacks quality onto the game unstoppably. The sound effects paired along with the external ambiance won't send just chills, but what feels like nitrogen down your spine, even if you are toughened up after years of excellent horror sound design. Just take a listen to a few of these games. My personal favorite is the Night Rippers, as the ambiance and life, or lack thereof, of a declining city terrified to the core by a serial killer is just eerie, to say the least. The sound effects and music do a whole other job to make you feel scared because they keep slowly terrifying you and make you think you're building up your guard, but nothing, and I mean nothing, can prepare you for what's about to come. If there's one thing people remember Puppet Combo's games for, it's their homicidal antagonists or protagonists in some case. The formula of having usually a tall, weapon-wielding lunatic who probably had too many snorts of PCP never fails to make a thrilling, awe-inspiring, and terrifying experience. I truly want to curl up into a ball and suck my thumb every time I see some tall figure charging at me with a weapon down a narrow corridor. The environments, sound, and overall feeling of dread will make you build up a guard, but it'll crumble faster than you can scream like you've gone through puberty in reverse. Survival horror games are almost synonymous with having an antagonist that's obviously more powerful than you, chasing you around, usually in a complicated or maze-like environment. But Puppet Combo immerses you in the horror and dread of the game before the scare, giving the player a seed of fear and planting it well. The aforementioned survival horror formula might be present in a lot of Puppet Combo's games, but not all of them. In Stay Out of the House, the goal is to, well, get out of the house as fast as possible. You can interact with various items and appliances in said house, and it's not maze-like because every room has its own unique purpose. Similarly, in the game Murder House, yeah, I don't think either of these houses will list for that much, it has you working with quite a few items around the house with more than enough quality horror to satisfy any gamer who's into the genre. It's a Resident Evil feeling game with a specially designed camera system that gives a really cinematic feel to everything, as if your protagonist is being watched by someone, or something. Enough puzzles to keep you thinking and enough chase sequences to put you on edge. On the infrequent occasion that you play as one of those kooks who just happens to have a sharp kitchen appliance lying around, There's still horror in playing as the maniac, since there's overwhelming dread in knowing that you're killing people who haven't done too much wrong, on top of the ambiance immersing you into the actions and depravity of a deranged killer. Even the games that underwhelm most people in terms of their quality are still horror-packed experiences that people should check out, since Puppet Combo never really fails to deliver their take on the horror genre. As mentioned, there's something truly unique about 80s cinematography, detail, and aesthetic that enchants me, but I can't put my finger on. It could be the signature neon Hotline Miami aesthetic, with elaborate style, iconic vehicles, memorable movies, comic books, video games, and TV show, all of which have some trademark part of the decade branded into them, which Puppet Combo has a more than perfect mastery of. Puppet Combo truly does fill that sort of personal void for me, because they consistently produce excellent survival horror games that put the player on edge, yet wanting more after the scares. I hope that Puppet Combo continues to improve the quality of their games, while keeping and at the same time developing the 80s aesthetic of their insanely scary games. Insanely scary games made up of core components that are essential to a player's experience interacting with them, as something like them stopping would be such a detriment to the horror and gaming communities alike. Puppet Combo gives an 80s B-grade slasher movie feel to PS1/PS2 style games from the late 90s and early 2000s in an effort to immerse the player in the experience and to let them know that this is a slasher style survival horror game, further immersing the player in the experience. The sound effects and music do a whole other job to make you feel scared, because they keep slowly terrifying you and make you think you're building up your guard, but nothing, and I mean nothing, can prepare you for what's about to come, because Puppet Combo scares are like nothing you'll have ever experienced before. Puppet Combo will always find some original way to scare you. All these and more are why Puppet Combo are masters of horror.